Okay, today's unit goal is the same one that we've been working with all chapter. Our daily objective is to solve polynomial equations by factoring, and our lesson comes from 5.3 in the book Solving Polynomial Equations. Okay, if we are going to just review by factoring this, okay? Remember the first thing you have to look for is a GCF, and then you're going to probably use some sort of box. So what's the GCF between 16 and 2? They're both divisible by 2. So now we divide them both by 2, we get 8x cubed plus 1. Okay, so now if I take this and I use a box, it's cubed, so I need a 2 by 3 box. And in the first box, the upper left-hand one, I'm going to put that 8x cubed. And down in the bottom right, I'll put the 1. Then we have to think what times itself 3 times makes 8x cubed. Well, x cubed would come from an x. And 2 times 2 times 2 makes 8, so it's 2x. Then what times itself 3 times makes 1? That's obviously 1. And now we can just start filling in some of the other things. So 2x times what would I put here makes 8x cubed? I think 2 times 4 and x times x squared. Okay. Now 1 times something makes 1, so that's 1. And now I can just start matching things up. So 2x times 1, they meet here, I get 2x. 1 times 4x squared, meet here, so I get 4x squared. And then remember we get this by making that the opposite, so negative 4x squared. And we get this by making it the opposite, so negative 2x. And then the hardest part of this whole process is to figure out what goes here. So you can go 2x times what is negative 4x squared, and you would get negative 2x. And then you want to double check, is negative 2x times 1 really negative 2x? And it is. So then you're going to write the outsides of your box down, so 2x plus 1 from the left-hand side. And 4x squared minus 2x plus 1 from the top. And then don't forget, because we factored this GCF out, it needs to follow us down to our final answer, so that 2 goes out there. Okay, this is asking us to find all real and imaginary solutions. So solutions implies that we are solving. And in order to solve, we know that it must equal 0, always. So the first thing we're going to do is minus the 4x over here. We have 4x cubed minus 6x squared minus 4x equals 0. Now this is much easier to factor. Okay, so we're going to factor this. And remember, we have to look for a GCF first. Now, if I didn't look for a GCF first, I might say, oh, it's x cubed. It's going to be a 2 by 3 box. But remember, you always look for that GCF first. Do that first. Okay? So what's my GCF between 4, 6, and 4? I would say it's 2. And they all have an x. So if I pull out a 2x from each of them, I'd get 2x squared minus 3x minus 2. Okay, so after you look for a GCF, then you can box. Well, if I'm going to box this, it's now x squared. So I know my box should be a 2 by 2 box. Okay, so we have to do our little riddle thing off to the side here. What times what equals negative 4? Remember, this is a times c. So I took 2 times negative 2 to get negative 4. And then what plus what equals b, which is my negative 3. Just reviewing, that comes from right here. Okay, we're going to ignore this. We're just boxing that what's in the parentheses right now. So two things that multiply to make negative 4 and add to make negative 3. I'm going to use negative 4 and 1. So now in my box I have 2x squared, negative 4x, 1x, and negative 2. And then the GCF here is 2x, and here is 1. 2x times x is 2x squared. 2x times negative 2 is negative 4x. And I can write down my final factored form from the outside of my box. Don't forget to carry down the 2x. And then it equals 0. Now remember, we were supposed to find out the solutions. We're supposed to be solving this. So here we really have, I'm going to put parentheses around this to make it look like we have 3 things multiplied that equal 0. Remember, what you have to do is set each of those things equal to 0. So if 2x equals 0, I divide everything by 2 and x equals 0. There's my first solution. If 2x plus 1 equals 0, I've got to do a little work here, but it looks like we can figure out pretty quickly that x equals negative 1/2. So there's my second solution. And then this one, we know all you have to do is look at the opposite here. So x equals 2. So there are my 3 solutions. Okay, last one. Find all real and imaginary solutions. Again, we know that this has to equal 0. So we get 2x cubed, oops, plus 54 equals 0. And then we just need to factor. Remember, step number 1, look for a GCF. So they both have a 2 that go into them. So I get 2 times x cubed plus 27 equals 0. Okay, so that's the GCF. And now I need to do a box. It's x cubed, so it's going to be a 2 by 3 box. So what times what times what makes x cubed? X. What times what makes 27? 3. X times x squared. 3 times 9. Okay, so then x times 9 is 9x. 3 times x squared is 3x squared. We'll put in our opposite ones, negative 3x squared and negative 9x. And we can see that this would be negative 3x. Okay, so remember, we did this factoring so that we can find our solutions. So our factored form is x plus 3 from the left and x squared minus 3x plus 9 from the top, and this 2 comes down. All right, so we have 3 things multiplied here that equals 0. 2 equals 0 doesn't make any sense, so we don't get anything from here. X plus 3 equals 0, and we get x equals negative 3. And then this one, if we set that equal to 0, it turns out we don't get any solutions. So anytime you have a 2 by 3 box, that top one, I want you to just write imaginary for these solutions. There's technically something called imaginary numbers, but we're not going to really learn about them. As long as you know that that's what comes out of that is some imaginary solutions, then you'll be fine. Okay, there is today's assignment.